Hello, my name is Peggy Holloway. I have a doctorate from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in voice and voice pedagogy, and I taught voice for about 30 years, both in a private studio at home and at several colleges and universities throughout my region. A year ago, I decided to retire. As you can see, I'm getting up there in years, and closed my studio. In the past year, I've done a lot of thinking about all of the information that I acquired in my many years of teaching and singing, and have thought, well, I really would like a way to continue to share that information. I've noticed that in the past few months with the coronavirus, the COVID-19, social distancing, stay at home, and a lot of distance learning is going on. And though I have no interest in doing Zoom or Skype lessons, I thought, well, this might be a good time to put together a short video series where I can share some of the information that I have acquired over the years, including the wisdom of a number of wonderful individuals I worked with. The list goes on, but I will mention Dr. Richard Miller and Barbara Hahn, Shirley Emmons. A couple of my own teachers include Donna Harler-Smith, Margaret Hemmen. But in particular, I will be sharing a lot of information from Dr. Thomas Hauser, who was one of my principal teachers and inspirations. I became very convinced as a singer and as someone who was dabbling in voice teaching fairly early on after earning my original bachelor's of music, that it's a huge responsibility to work with the human voice. And I became more and more convinced that I wanted to ensure that I was really using sound information and that I got as much training as I possibly could. And that's why I pursued a master's degree. And then later on, I got my doctorate in voice and voice pedagogy. Even after I had completed that degree, I felt it was very important to continue my education, reading everything I could find, including the Nats Journal of Voice, going to conferences and workshops, going to master classes, and just continuing to make sure that the background that I had, the information I was providing my students, was accurate and most of all healthy. It's very important because the singing voice is part of the entire human being. It encompasses mind, body, and spirit. So it's a huge responsibility. As Richard Miller, the great vocal pedagogue of the last century, says in the intro to one of his important books on singing, our motto needs to be the same as that of medical professionals. Primum non nocere. First, do no harm. We certainly want to be sure that we do not provide information or work with students in a way that they might harm the very delicate mechanism that is the human voice. So that became my motto as well. And I thought it was very important to learn a lot of voice science. My guru, as I mentioned, Thomas Hauser, was of the belief that all singing begins with what he called fundamental technique. Now, there are a variety of singing styles, and certainly this little video series, as it I hope will become, is only going to be involved with fundamental technique that can be applicable, that can be applied to whatever style of singing that you choose to do, and yet will do in a healthy way. So my little video series, as I hope this will become, is going to involve a series of videos on fundamental technique. Now, there's a lot of debate about, is singing a science or is singing an art? Richard Miller referred to the kinds of teachers that might be more mechanistic, that is, using science and technique, while there are others who would be more of the empirical or imagery types of singers. When I taught vocal pedagogy at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, it was the first year that undergraduates in the Bachelor of Music program were required to take a semester of voice pedagogy. And in my introductory course, I mentioned this about Richard Miller and related a story that he had told at a masterclass I attended. At the time, he was bemoaning a tendency for the celebrity or diva singing star masterclass. And he had attended one with someone who I will not mention, but a very famous opera singer who listened to a young woman sing and then informed her, I think the problem is that you are thinking way too much pink and this piece needs to be much more blue. One of my students in the class said, well, that makes perfect sense to me. Now that was a learning moment for me because I was going under the assumption that that made absolutely no sense at all and it wasn't particularly helpful. But imagery can be very useful, and we have centuries of empirical, that is experiential, or sensations of singing that in times before the invention of any of the kinds of instruments that we have today to measure anything scientific or to look at the vocal folds or to really understand the physiological process, those images were very useful. And I still will use a lot of that terminology. But to me, it became very important that I actually understand why we have those sensations, why these images might work. So the idea of, are you an artist or are you a scientist? Well, how about we find a balance? And that is certainly what I try to do. So the first of my little series will involve, as I said, fundamental technique, but maybe towards the end I will do a couple of sessions that are more about applying all of these technical abilities to the final product, which is certainly the communication, the performance, which we want to do as singers. Now, there are several different models for how to organize this process, and I really enjoy Dr. Hauser's, who makes a good point that not only are singers the instrument, the vocal instrument, but we are also the instrumentalist. What other instrument can you say that about? So as every instrument, we would have a director, an activator, a vibrator, a resonator, and an articulator. Now, for singing, the director is going to be the brain, the intellect, the emotion, sort of the inspiration, the reason for singing. And the activator is the breath, the vibrator, the actual vocal folds, the resonator, the vocal tract, which is all of the space from the top of the vocal folds up and to the mouth and the nose and where the air will leave the human body. And then the articulator, which is the tongue, lips, teeth, gum ridge, soft palate, hard palate, jaw, and the glottis itself. So we'll have a series of videos about each of these, along with some exercises, some things that you can do yourself. And then in the end, we will have the instrumentalist, which will involve so many aspects: mind, spirit, posture, energy, coordination, creativity, text, communication, experiences, and then all of those musical elements such as pitch and rhythm that make up what we do as singers. So I hope that this will be useful to you. You can use this information however you want. If you have students that you are working with, I'm sure a lot of you are already creating your own materials and sharing with maybe school students. But you can certainly use any of the materials that I put up on the Peggy Holloway Vocal Studio Facebook page. And if you do have comments or questions, I will certainly address them. If you want to just put things in the comments under this video, there will not be any interaction, but I can certainly address anything like that. So looking forward to my next video, which we will start with posture breath. See you soon.